there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to make this pretty Valentine's card using some supplies from our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry. I'm using Summer on the Farm, dotted heart border, and tapestry hearts, and you can find them at pegstamps.com along with the inks that I'm using today as well. I like to use my smaller ink pads whenever I can because I can fit more on my table as I'm stamping, and when I'm using peg stamps, I like to have a lot of variety. Now, I wanted this to look like a mason jar, so I'm actually using a little bit of watercolor to spread some ink around on this picture. So I actually pressed the ink pad on my watercolor palette to get some of that color, and I also mixed in a little of my turquoise watercolor paint just to both harmonize with the color I stamped with and also give it a little bit more color so it felt a little more solid. I'm just using a water brush rather than a brush and water, but you certainly can use that as well. And I like to bring some of the blue color underneath the vase just to give it a little bit of reflection. Now I'm using a red ink, it's kind of like a watermelon color, to stamp this large heart, and then I'm going to fill in with some of the smaller ones. Remember, stamp your biggest elements first, or your more solid elements first, to help you build and layer the design. Now I'm going to use 3 smaller hearts here, and I am using that in a little bit darker of a red, and I like that because I can overlap the first heart if I want to because I'm using a darker color. Now with a really pale green, I'm stamping in some greenery. This almost looks like eucalyptus. I like it because it's just kind of like lacy, so I can stamp it in the jar, I can stamp it overlapping my hearts, and it's not going to overpower it because it's an airy design and I'm using such a pale ink. These Memento ink blocks are really good for this. And now I'm using some nice bright yellow to stamp in some kind of, not quite like daisies, but they're kind of like a wildflower, so they look very easy and breezy in this arrangement. Now I have this tiny little grouping of 2 petals. I'm stamping those with a little bit darker of an ink because they're small and I want them to stand out a little more. And because they're small, I can stack them up, I can fill in, I can layer up, and make them as full or as sparse as I want. And with this last vine and berries, I'm actually making my stems into the jar with that. So all you got to do is stamp it a few times and it will give the impression of having some fullness in there. Or you could use a pen and draw in some branches if you like. Now this is ready to die cut. Oh, I wanted to mention that when I cut my cardstock for this card, I cut a regular piece of cardstock in half and used half of that for the card base. I stamped my mason jar on a quarter of it, and then I took a quarter and I embossed it with this cute whimsical heart embossing folder. This was one of those dollar bin finds at Joann's, but I thought it was so unique and different from anything else I had that it was worth investing in. And I think that a style like this, it's fun. It's not your traditional heart, but it's also got a little bit of a primitive vibe, so I don't think it's going to go out of style too quickly. After brushing on and wiping on some pigment ink, I decided to go in with some Distress Oxide inks because it's a little bit more thick and covering, and then I spritzed on some water to give it a little bit of a pebbly texture. This is the Recollections heavyweight cardstock, and it does weird stuff when you spritz water on it, but I like that extra texture and I thought it'd be really fun for this card. I made sure to cut my panel a 1/4 inch smaller than my card base so I'd have a nice border, and now I'm like tearing the edge towards myself so I have a little bit of a rough edge. I particularly like this style. If you prefer clean and simple, don't tear it, just glue it down as is, and that will look pretty as well. You got to do what feels right for you. You want to definitely favor your own style over my style or anybody else's style. Do what feels good to you, because then your cards are going to have your signature style. When I was cleaning out my pattern paper the other day, I found this really pretty, I think it was Bow Bunny paper. It had just a fun distressed pink and gray pattern to it, and I thought that would be really pretty, and I also did a torn edge to that. And since it had hints of green, I decided to take a little bit of green and ink the edge of my die cut panel. And that's an old Spellbinders die cut, but of course you could trim it to a rectangle with your paper trimmer or use any sort of shape cutter you wanted. Make sure you like it. That's all that's important. Use the techniques and the ideas I give you here to make your cards your own. You don't have to follow anything exactly, and you don't have to use the exact supplies I do. In fact, it might be hard to find the exact stuff I used on my cards because like this felt is many years old. It's from Queen & Company, but I've been pulling it out of my drawer and using it because I've hoarded it for so long waiting for the special project, and I realized that all the projects can be special. Use it, right? But use whatever you have. Now, when I was looking at this, because I'm getting ready to put this piece down, I realized that, the jar just didn't stand out enough. So I'm using a colored pencil in that turquoise color just to define some areas so it stands out a little bit more. You can do that whenever you're stamping. It doesn't seem to be bold enough for you. Just go in and enhance it with a little bit of colored pencil or a little pale marker or something like that. Pencil's nice because it doesn't, or you can layer up slowly is what I want to say. It's not going to over affect it. And I added on a little bit of eyelash yarn just to layer up on the felt and give it a little bit more texture. For my last step in this card, I'm going to add some embellishments, and I really enjoy the little wood veneer shapes. I picked them up when I see some kind of generic shapes that I think will go with a lot of things. You can stain them with ink pads if you don't want to leave them plain, and it's just an embellishment that I tend to enjoy, but you can use whatever you like. Hearts come in all sorts of different materials. They're a classic design, and they're not going to go out of style. I die cut a aqua heart out of an upholstery sample, and now I'm punching a heart out of some of that background pattern paper that I had layered over my embossed panel just to repeat the design and give a different scale to the picture. And I just adhered those on with some wet glue. I hope you enjoyed this video today, and I hope it gives you some ideas on how you can mix and match your older supplies along with your newer supplies. For a final detail, I decided to add in some stickles, and this is just basically glitter glue. I'm just adding dabs here and there, but you could totally just add little dabs of glue or with a glue pen and sprinkle on some glitter if you prefer. The nice thing about a glitter glue is that you can direct it where it's going to go when you won't have any stray glitter to deal with, so you can do whatever you like on your card. If you want to find any of the supplies I use, make sure you check out our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry at pegstamps.com. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting!